Всем привет. Здорово, ребята. My name is Mett Tomson, and welcome to English You Can Use. This is the program where you can learn English that you can actually use tomorrow. Not lose. Sorry. Boy, that was a bad mistake. Use. Thanks for joining us this evening. If you're new here, say hello in the comments section. If you're here for the 40th time, I think this is our 45th episode or right around there, say hello. I would like to see you. We're still basically locked down. We can't do public events, but I'd love to start that soon when it's safe. Good evening, Svetlana. Tonight we have a really, really good program. I know I always say that, but actually we do, I promise. We have a guest coming all the way from Brazil, a former consul general in Екатеринбурге, Scott Rowland. We're going to talk a little bit about his memories here in the Urals. But first off, I got a word for you, so let's get to that. All right, so your word of the day is, hello everybody here, Nikita, Anastasia, Konstantin, and Irina. So our word of the day, and I have this in mind for Konstantin, who I know works in finance, cash cow. Cash cow. So if you're an intermediate or advanced speaker, you understand cash, baksov, много баксов, and cow, korova. That's not what we're talking about. The actual, what we're talking about here in English, let me see if I can, where is it? There it is. It's a product or investment that provides steady income. And I found out from one of my Russian friends that there is an equivalent. It's kuritsa. Nesushaya zolotoye yaitsa. It's the hen that lays the golden egg. Is that right? My right translation? So if you ever hear cash cow in a news article or in, I don't know if you'd be talking about cash cow in conversation, but this is what they mean. Okay, so that's your word to remember for tonight, cash cow, cash cow. All right, let's go on to our presentation. And I talked to somebody this week about learning English. And the things, it's hard to learn English. You should just try to express yourself the best way you can, be creative. But these little phrases might help you if you're trying to get your English to the very top level. And you can't really learn it in a book. So these are some phrases you might hear around an office with Americans. So the first one is pull your own weight. Pull your own weight. And it means to do your share of work. Paulina says it's also, I don't have this here, I'm going to put it down here. Donne korova, quite literally. Oh, donne. I learned something new. So, like I said, pull your own weight is to do your share of work. All right, I got to read this as it goes along. That's a long comment. All right, well, I'll take my time here. Pull your weight is to do your share of work. I'm listening to my feedback here on the screen. Here, I'll even put it up on the screen here. Well, I actually can't. Doesn't show. So if you're around, maybe your boss will say, hey, time to pick up the pace. It's time to pull your weight. It's trying to motivate you, try to get you going. Okay? Let's go to the next one, and I'll make sure I go through this slowly. Pull the plug. Pull. There's a plug. Plug is what you have in the bathtub that stops the water. Pull the plug. Does everybody have it? Pull the plug. This means to stop something, to stop a project or a program. I'll put this up there. It means that you don't want to do this anymore. So a boss might say, hey, you've done great work, Matt, but we're going to pull the plug on your funding for this project because it's not doing anything. So it's not a really positive phrase. Does that make sense? All right. Let's go to the next one. Shape up or ship out. Again, these are very strong phrases and motivational phrases from bosses, probably. Shape up or ship out. I'll give you a chance. It's something that, again, a boss wants you to start doing work harder. Wants you to keep pushing. And really what she or he is saying is improve your attitude or leave. Get with the program or go. You need to listen to what I'm telling you, or you need to, maybe you won't be a part of the team. So maybe it's almost like a threat, ugroza, but it's not quite. Maybe it's a soft threat. But sometimes you'll hear coaches or CEOs or bosses use that phrase. Ship up or ship out. You might hear it in a movie too. All right, let's move to the next one. Step up to the plate. It's very similar. But if you don't understand baseball or you don't know baseball, this makes no sense in a foreign language. To a foreign speaker, probably. So step up to the plate means it's a baseball reference. Baseball, right in the front, there's a plate. That's the home plate. Don't ask me why it's called a plate. It has nothing to do with kitchenware. But it's to take action or to volunteer or to do well. So, for example, I would say, boy, my colleague, she stepped up to the plate and took care of all the people who needed help. I stepped up to the plate and volunteered to participate in a vaccine trial. That's what they mean, step up to the plate. It's a positive thing. It's seen as very positive. So hopefully that helps. And the last one is bite the bullet. Very strange phrase. To bite a bullet. You probably know what a bullet is. It comes out of a gun. To bite. I'll give everybody a chance to write that down or understand it. Bite the bullet. If you're working on your pronunciation, listen to me, how I'm saying it. Bite. It's the hard of the t. And that means to make a difficult decision. To do something you don't want to do, but you have to. So neither positive nor negative. It's a tough decision. Does that make sense? Hope so. Okay, if you have a question, leave it question in the comments section. I'll answer it either during this broadcast or I'll look at them right after and I'll get to it. All right, so we have a fun translation tonight. Translation, it's a common phrase, and this is what I want you to do. I want you to read the Russian phrase and try to bring out the meaning in Russian, not the literal translation, not bukvalno, but what's the sense, the smysl. And the phrase is Sem pyatnits na nedeli. Sem pyatnits na nedeli. Okay? I'm going to give you a second to do that. In the meantime, I'm going to tell you that next week we have a great guest coming from Moscow, one of my colleagues from the embassy, Jihan Radgowski-Jones. And next week we have a really, really cool discussion in Russian that is about happiness and how maybe Russians and Americans express happiness differently. And it's two experts from Georgetown University, but they're Russian speakers. It's going to be really fun next Wednesday, March 24th. So you should get in. So does anybody have a guess? Sem pyatnits? Sem pyatnits? Na nedeli? Это очень трудно. Let's see if anybody has it, can do it. I don't see anybody yet. All right, well, I'm going to put up the translation. It means to be indecisive or can't make up your mind or don't know what you want. Is that right? Is that correct? I'll wait for your answer. We're 15 seconds in the future, so It means something like you change your mind or you're not very reliable. There, Natalia got it. Anastasia, rain at 7, fine at 11. Yeah, I've heard this too. That's a translation. I don't know if I understand it, but I guess that's what it is. Inconsistent, maybe. Nikita says, "Постоянно менять свой планы." Yeah. So how would you say that in English? Constantly changing your mind, constantly changing your plans, right? Yeah. Okay. So we don't have an equivalent in English for this, but I thought it was interesting, Russian one. So now let's move to our guest who comes to us live from Brasilia. It's early in the morning there. Hello, Scott. How are you?
Good morning, and good evening to all of you in your time zone. It's a nice, pleasant day in Brasilia, which most days are.
I bet. It's kind of nice year round, correct? Nice tropical weather.
Exactly. No, and it's funny because, of course, they have a summer and a winter, which reflects more the length of the day, but the temperatures are generally always between the low 70s to the mid 80s, at least in this part of Brazil. Brazil's a huge country, not quite as big as Russia, but it's very big, and so there is some climatic difference across the country too.
Yeah. So to give our audience some introduction, you were the former you were the consul general at the consulate here in Ekaterinburg, but you've also served in Azerbaijan, Pakistan, I think Germany a few times.
Right.
Belarus, you were the charge d'affaires, which is pretty much you were the ambassador, sort of, unofficial ambassador, and you've also worked for the OSCE. So what are you doing now in Brasilia?
Oh, well, since you're doing an English class, let me come back to the title charge d'affaires. As I used to joke with people occasionally, we're using a French phrase, of course, but I said, well, basically, my view is dude in charge.
Dude in charge.
Or the person in charge, dude being a little bit more funny, colloquial way to say it. But yeah, so I retired last year in April. And my wife had been assigned to Brasilia, and I stayed in the U.S. during the first months of COVID, but we moved to Brasilia in September. So we've been here together about 6 months now, and have really enjoyed our time in Brazil.
I would too, but especially now here, and we still have snow outside in Ekaterinburg. And I understand you do a lot of photography now. I'm going to put some photos. You do a lot of bird watching, and you do a lot of traveling when you can.
Yeah, all of that. So I mean, that's of course one of the nice things about being retired is if you choose not to work, which at the moment I have chosen not to do. My wife and I wanted to. That's a shot of Rio, by the way. Let me just say too, if anybody who's listening or watching ever has a chance to get to South America, Rio de Janeiro is one of the world's great cities, and thanks to my career with the State Department, I have seen a number of the world's great cities, but Rio is one of them. And when I first, my wife and I have probably been there 4 times now. After the first trip, I said, boy, I'll tell you, I don't have too many regrets in my life, but I really wish I had discovered Rio de Janeiro a lot earlier in my life, because it is fabulous. I mean, fabulous beaches, fabulous weather, mountains, sand, and the city itself. I mean, the city itself without all the other great stuff. But I mean, picture Paris or London or Berlin or Rome on an absolutely jaw-dropping beach with nice weather all year round. Because it's a big cosmopolitan city with wonderful restaurants, museums, shops, all that.
I've never been there either, but I'd like to someday. Here's another picture. This is where is this? Is this in Brazil?
So those are the Iguazu Falls, which are on the border with Argentina.
Yes.
And again, another tip, if you ever get to go, one of the choices you can make is you can go to the Brazilian side, you can go to the Argentinian side, and strangely, or I guess expectedly, the Brazilian colleagues, my wife talks, oh, you you don't need to go to the Argentinian side. The Brazilian side is enough, which is, I would say, stupid advice. Take 2 days, spend a day on the Brazilian side, and the views are spectacular. And then take another day, take a full day, and go to the Argentinian side. You don't want to rush through this. The views are completely different. And again, when you have 2 days to spend looking at just absolutely jaw-dropping scenery, why would you want to rush? Why would you want to say, I only want to see half of it? So don't make that decision. Go, take 2 full days and see the whole thing. It is fabulous.
Good advice. I'm gonna put one more. You do a lot of bird watching, so I wanted to just put this up while you. That's a toucan, I believe.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a toucan. There are several different types. This is the biggest toucan, the Toco toucan, Toco. But there's in Rio they have what they call a channel-billed toucan, which has more of a black bill and it's a little bit smaller and a yellow throat. Fabulous birds, the kind that you see them and you want to stop whatever you're doing to get a really good look at them because they're fabulous. And I don't know if you've seen that photo. When I first saw toucans the first time, I looked at this one. I said, "Oh my God, they have blue eyes." I mean, not only is everything else fabulous about them, but they have a fairly bright turquoise blue eye. It's fabulous.
I know him from my childhood from Toucan Sam, I think, from Fruit Loops. Sorry.
A famous cereal, the mascot of a famous American breakfast cereal.
Yes.
Right.
So tell us about your memories of Yekaterinburg. You were here for 2 years as consul general. You traveled around a lot. And what place does Yekaterinburg hold in your, I won't say your heart, but in your career as a diplomat?
Well, both in my heart and in terms of my career and what I look back fondly on, very, very special place. I loved it. And you are giving me like 45 minutes to answer this question, right?
Sure.
Yeah, because when you were kind enough to give me a hint that you might ask me about this, and I thought, you know what, I don't want to miss something. So I sat down and tried to think of, not everything, that definitely would have been too long a list, but I came up with about 10 major highlights, which I could then break down into even smaller things. But so one was we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the U.S. consulate when I was there, and that was fun. It was until you got to the 25th anniversary. I think it had been the largest representational event we had ever had in Yekaterinburg. We held it in the Cosmos Theater. We brought in a U.S. Air Force band. The first time that U.S. military in uniform had ever performed anywhere in the Urals, and they played in Yekaterinburg, but then we took them down to Chelyabinsk, we took them out to Perm, and just a smash experience. And then tied to that, but it was a year later, we had the 60th anniversary of Dien Pobjedy, the Victory Day.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. It's not as big a deal, of course, in the U.S., but it's a huge deal in Russia. So we brought the U.S. Air Force band back, and this time when they played, we made a special deal and really invited all the veterans to come and hear the performance. And for me, one of the best parts was because I was one of the organizers and was at all the concerts. I got to meet these people, including the woman you see here.
Yeah.
And to meet these heroes of the effort to liberate the USSR, to liberate Europe from the grip of the Nazis. Oh, I'll never forget that. It was very special for me. And I hope it was very special for all the veterans who got to come and stand on stage with their American allies, right? That's the one thing which through all the years we've tended to overlook is we were allies in this effort, and we don't, and it's even worse in America. We just don't tell that story often enough of what a major role Russians and other citizens of the Soviet Union played in liberating Europe.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great point. I'm going to put up another photo that's kind of maybe a good memory for you, which is going to Magnitogorsk. And tell us a little bit about why you found that so interesting when you were consul general, and then maybe there's a backstory.
Well, you gave it away. I was curious to see, without the tip, if any of your viewers would know where that was. Magnitogorsk, of course, I think is the biggest steelworks in the Urals. For a while, it was the biggest steelworks anywhere in the Soviet Union. Built in the 1930s, and it's interesting. At the time when it was built, this was the Soviet Union trying, under Stalin, trying to become a major industrial power. And they had to have steelworks like this. So this was built completely from scratch with, guess what, a lot of American assistance. They brought in, an engineering firm from Cleveland, Ohio, I think, that helped them design and build the plant. And then, unfortunately, in the mid-30s, what happened was Stalin started to crack down on dissent. And because he was building these huge industrial enterprises in the Urals, they eventually closed the Urals to foreigners altogether. So there were really no foreigners in the Urals from the 1930s until the 1980s. And at that point, I was one of 24 young Americans that came back on a U.S. information agency exhibit that went to Magnitogorsk. Otherwise, I will confess, I never would have had a clue about Magnitogorsk. But wow, I so enjoyed. We were there for 2 months with the exhibit. It broke records. There were thousands of people lined up for hours every day in the hot summer sun to come and see a little piece of America, because guess what? For 50 years, they had never seen Americans walking the streets of their city, had never had a chance to talk to them like we're doing today online. So it was a fabulous experience. And of course, when I came back to Ekaterinburg in 2003, one of the first trips I made was down to Magnitogorsk to see what had happened. And in that photo, I was with John Byerly, who was our deputy chief of mission at the time. Just, an absolutely fabulous human being and foreign service officer. And luckily for the US and for Russia, he came back later as ambassador to Russia, and I think had,
That's
3-4 very, very good years there at that time.
I hope I get to go to Magnitogorsk before my time ends here, but we'll see. I'm going to put up one more photo. I think, this is you in Brazil. And I want to remind our audience, you can please feel free to ask Scott any questions about him, about Russia, maybe about diplomacy. We want to hear from you. So I'm ready for it. I'm ready to put them up on your question up on the screen. So let's maybe I wanted to ask you about, you're a Russian speaker and you're a German speaker, but you speak Russian at a high level. When you were living here in Russia, did you ever have any funny mishaps with the language? We've had a couple guests in the past who did, but I thought maybe you have a funny story about understanding Russian culture or the language.
Yeah, no, well, and of course, culture is another field. I was thinking more of language when you gave me the tip on that question. So one is something. So the one example I'll give you, I didn't make this mistake in Russian because I had, in a sense, mastered German before I'd mastered Russian, and some of the grammatical things are the same. But so one that gives American fits is using the dative case to express certain things. And one is, how are you feeling? And especially when it comes to temperature. So in German, which I was perfecting before I learned Russian, one of my colleagues once said, we were out at a wine festival and it was chilly, and they said, "Oh, how are you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a bit." Oh, you know what I was asking them? I said, "Are you cold?" And of course, everyone around me who they understood English, but they were all fluent German speakers, and they all cracked up speaking because I'd said the equivalent in Russian of "Вы холодный," and they said, no, Scott, you can't say it like that, because if you ask the question like that, it means, "Are you frigid?" in English. So in English, we just don't use the dative and accusative cases like that. We have a different word for it, right? Are you cold is, are you comfortable? Are you warm? But if you wanted to say, "Are you frigid?" then it would be in Russian, it'd be, "Вы холодный человек, что вы?" Something like that. So anyway, that was, mistake I made in German, I made sure I didn't make it in Russian. I knew what the way to say that in the dative, не холодно, I'm cold. So
Yeah, it's an easy one to make. I think I've done it before too.
another one I would say and I would just use it as a caution. And once I had and this experience I had in Russia as a beginning speaker. I was with another foreigner, and it was the first trip we both were making to Russia. We were in an in-tourist hotel back in the days of the Soviet Union, and we were comparing the little bits and scraps of Russian we knew, and somehow we got onto the subject of profanity. And she mentioned a word she knew, and we giggled about it, and I mentioned a word I knew, and I forget which one of us was talking, but about the time one of us used a fairly profane Russian word, our Russian waitress had come to the table and then just looked absolutely appalled that in a public place, and I'm not going to even try to remember what the phrase was. And that was the first time I thought, yeah, you know what? That's really probably not a very good idea for me to be trying to, in any way, shape, or form, use Russian Russian obscene phrases in a public place. And but I've heard the reverse, and I can tell you as a native speaker of English, when especially I would say it's the F word is one that foreigners try to use. They hear comedians use it, right? It's funny, Jay Leno or Jimmy Fallon or Bill Maher use the F word, and it was funny and people laughed. But as a native speaker and a comedian, you can get away with it. If as a foreigner you use that in the wrong way, and I'll tell you most of the time it's the wrong way, and you'll see the reaction of foreigners like, oh no, don't say that. It's really not good.
It's really tricky to know how to use it. All right, so we got a lot of questions here, so I want to make sure we don't leave anybody out. So it's vitally important to speak carefully, just to speaking about this, without offending anybody and leaving no chance to be judged. Do diplomats go through specific training at work or even at college to do this?
You know what? That point in particular, I wouldn't say like there's a course on it. I would say you continually get feedback from your colleagues, though. And if you do slip up, you will hear about it. Now, if you learned a language, like I think you learned your Russian at the Foreign Service Institute, right?
In Russia, but also in the Foreign Service, both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, then when you have formal language classes, certainly you would get feedback from your language teachers that, hey, watch it. When you're discussing this topic, don't bring this up. Don't say it this way. And they probably would. You also get classes if you have the luxury, which we don't always have, of attending the Foreign Service Institute. You can have area study courses, or sometimes with a country as big as Russia, it might just be a course specifically on Russia and Russian history and culture.
Yeah.
And over the course of those classes, they will tell you, here's things that Russians feel very strongly about. Here's a topic you have to be really careful about because the American view of it's just different. So when you bring it up with a Russian, you might really want to think about how you phrase it, how you choose to discuss it.
No, absolutely. I think we learn on the run, or as we go. Another question from Paulina. It says, "What is it like to live in contrasting climates? It's mostly cold in Urals, while Brazil is tropical and a hot country." So you probably don't have the same clothing now that you did here.
No, I'll hold up my sleeves. I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt. I would only wear a long sleeve shirt in Brazil for some kind of formal event. And in the time of COVID, basically formal events where you're inside with air conditioning, with large groups of other people, forget it. I mean, they just don't happen. So I have probably worn a long sleeve shirt in the last 6 months, maybe twice. And it would have been for some kind of online session like this where I thought, oh, what the heck, I'll put my jacket on and a nice shirt for half an hour. And I also generally wear shorts. I don't usually wear socks and shoes. I wear sandals. How great, huh? That you can dress like that all year round.
Вам повезло. I think that's how they say it in Russian.
Yeah.
You're lucky.
Обязательно, повезло, совсем.
So Anastasia said, "I've heard that Rio is a dangerous city for living there. Is it true?" What is your experience?
So, we were warned about, our embassy colleagues, anywhere we live and work, they will give us warnings. And there were warnings about Rio and about crime in big Brazilian cities in general. Rio is a city of about 6 million. And, in most countries, anytime you get to a city that size of about 6 million, you probably have parts of the city where poor people live. And if you're smart, you will try to stay away from those parts of the city. And one of the other things you'll do if you're smart, as a guy who's traveled all over the world, I don't wear chains. I don't wear gold chains around my neck. I don't wear fancy gold watches on my wrist. I would never wear a Rolex in any kind of big city where I wasn't absolutely sure it was safe. We had heard a lot about Rio. So the first time we were there, we went down to Ipanema Beach, which is one of the great beaches in the world. And we basically went with almost nothing. We had probably a key to the hotel, and maybe we had like the equivalent of about $2 in case we needed something small. And if we lost it, we didn't care. No jewelry, nothing, no cameras the first time we went there. So anyway, but the longer we were there and the more often we went to this beach, we realized that Ipanema Beach is pretty safe. There's a pretty good police presence all along the beach, all along the storefronts and hotels. Copacabana Beach is another one right next door to Ipanema Beach. And there are a couple of, the major tourist sites in Rio are very well patrolled. And so I would say, generally, I wouldn't categorize Rio as any more dangerous than any big American city that I've ever been to, including New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago. The same advice, though. If in some of Chicago's neighborhoods, I know Chicago pretty well. If you were to go to any of the wrong neighborhoods in Chicago, God help you. I mean, I would almost guarantee you'd have a good chance of being robbed, and you might be seriously hurt or worse.
Yeah, it just seems like it's not a country thing; it's a human thing. It exists.
Right.
We got a question from Elizaveta. What is the toughest moment in your career, and how did you handle it? Whoa, that's a tough one.
Yeah, I've had a few. So I'd say the most dangerous one was when I was in Pakistan, and this one was just reflexes because we were lucky. My life was saved by training I had from the Department of State just a few weeks earlier. It was, I think it was 1999, and the embassy bombings in Africa had just happened in Nairobi in Tanzania, and two embassies had been bombed and completely destroyed, and we identified some real weaknesses we had of things we just weren't doing right. And one of the things they had done when they bombed the embassy was there were two bombs in Nairobi. There was a first one, which was a small one, but big enough, it made a huge noise and caused a small amount of damage. And the embassy was huge. And when the bomb went off, everybody, and I would have done this, I know I would have, everybody ran to the windows to look to see what was happening, right? And then they had a second bomb. And the second bomb was much bigger, and it blew up, and it blew all the windows in. So some of the people standing at the windows were just killed immediately. Others were very, very badly injured. Some of them died from their injuries. So based on that, they conducted some emergency training in places all around, and places that were dangerous got the training first. Well, I was in Pakistan, in Islamabad, and they gave us this training. They started what you now know as the duck and cover drill, which is when you get an alarm, you fall on the floor and get down so that you're not standing at the window. So we had the training. And within a couple weeks, we were in our offices, and my Pakistani assistant came in to talk to me. We heard this huge boom, and I grabbed him, and we fell down on the floor. And a second later, all the glass came in. And because of that training, I was on the floor. I did not get hit by the glass. I did not get hit by the pieces of projectile. My assistant was doubly lucky because his chair, we came out, looked later, there was a hole that big in his chair, or a huge piece. This was a rocket that had been fired at the American Center where we were working. And Thankfully he was in talking to me. Thankfully we hit the ground. The worst injury was a local guard who got hit with a small piece of shrapnel in his leg. No one killed, but incredibly lucky. So
Wow. Well, I think when you have a long career in this type of business, that stuff can happen. But I'm glad it turned out okay. We got this is another Brazil question. Do you like when capital is not the major city but a smaller one? Is Brasilia? Is it? He's trying to make comparisons like Washington D.C. in the U.S. or Yekaterinburg
right.
in Russia.
Well, Yekaterinburg was delightful that way, and even Yekaterinburg, of course, is not exactly a small city, but it's not the huge megalopolis that New York is. And the one observation I will make, again, as somebody who's been to a lot of these huge capital cities, well, Moscow and London would be two of them, or a city that's not a capital, but arguably the most famous American city, New York. New York, Moscow, London, in my opinion, have a lot more in common with each other than they do with any of the three countries they're in. And one of the things I will always laugh, but people say it all the time is, a foreigner will come to one of these three countries I mentioned and say, oh, I was in New York. I know all about America now. It's like, no, you don't. I'm glad you got to see New York. You got to see a few things about America while you were there. New York is not a typical American city. And I think I can say with some, the Russian people watching this will have to, weigh in themselves. But I would venture that Moscow is not a typical Russian city. It's a really interesting city, but man, it's not like any other city I've seen in Russia. And the same with London. My wife is British. London is, they're fabulous cities. There's a ton to see and do. London is nothing like the rest of England. So that's a huge mistake you can make as a foreigner, to go to the big city and say, oh, now I know all about this country because I went to the capital city. Absolutely. And same with Brasilia. Brasilia it's a very pleasant city. Now, Brasilia is an artificial city. It was built from scratch, from nothing, in the 1960s. It's very pleasant. It's beautiful, tree-lined, pleasant climate, but it's not a typical Brazilian city.
Well, I've told many people here that, you want many people in Russia to know about Miami and New York and Washington, but there's so much more to explore. And if you get off to some smaller cities, you will experience a new part of American culture that might be even more interesting than you thought, and is
right.
quite unique.
Well, so let me make a comment on Russian culture too. And one of the things I loved about Ekaterinburg, getting back to all the things I'd love to tell you about from my time there, I got to travel a lot. I think I was the first consul general who made it to every oblast in the consular district. I mean, it's the size of India. It's huge.
Yeah.
And in Ekaterinburg, people there have had the U.S. consulate for 25 years now. They're kind of used to having, and a lot of other consulates, they're used to having foreigners around. But you go to some of these other places outside Yekaterinburg, and then sometimes you're meeting Russians who have never met an American before. But I'll say, in that regard, Russians are famous for their hospitality, their gostoprimstvo. And when you get outside of cities like New York in the US or Los Angeles, if you go to the Midwest or other places in the South, to small towns, I think foreigners will also find Americans, like Russians, I think we have this in common. We can be remarkably hospitable people. We love to meet people from countries like Russia from far away and hear their stories and show them a little bit about our hometown and what we like. And so you miss that if you go to New York, which is, foreigners in New York, who cares? Everybody's a foreigner in New York. But get out to the small towns and the rural areas. You can see some fabulous things.
Well, I think that's a great place to end our conversation, that Russians and Americans have a lot more in common than we think. We just need that opportunity to get to know one another. And I hope after the pandemic ends that the traveling, the visas will open up, and the flights will open up, and there'll be more and more opportunities for us to forge strong relationships with one another, because it's possible, and we'll find out that we do have a lot more similarities than we think. Well, thank you so much,
Couldn't
Scott.
agree more.
Thanks so much for joining us this morning or this evening for us. We hope you can maybe come back at some point, and wish you the best of luck enjoying Brazil and your travels across South America.
Well, thanks so much. It was really fun to look back on the days I spent in Yekaterinburg and the region, let me emphasize, because I did love getting outside of Yekaterinburg as well. And I wish you and everyone watching all the best, and hope I'll be able to get back one of these days when it's easier to get a visa and visit everybody in person.
All right. Thank you so much.
Take care.
You too. All right, everyone. That's our program tonight. Glad you could join us. Really good questions. I hope the tips will help. Cash cow. You won't really use it much in regular speech, but if you read it now, you know it and you'll be able to recognize it. So thanks again, Nikita. I'll put some of your. Join us next week again, 7 o'clock, Tuesday. We'll be with Jehan Rogowski-Jones, a colleague of ours in Moscow. She works with the American Center. Really, really interesting person. And I think you're going to enjoy it. Thanks again, and we will see you soon. Пока-пока. Bye.